Thanks for following my channel, and today I'm going to talk about signs from the spirit world. Actually, this was a requested topic, so if you put your messages below in the comments, if you ever have some suggestions, I will pick up on what you've asked. And I thought this was quite an interesting thing to ask about, because we all get signs that the spirit world are around us sometimes. I did something recently about angel feathers, which I was a little bit scathing on that one, if I'm honest, because I think people sometimes overread into things. But certainly the spirit world do let us know they're around, and I particularly get a lot of feelings about this as a medium. And also when I've had my columns in the newspapers. I had a column once in the Scottish Daily Record and another one in the Daily Mail for a while, and also in some of the women's magazines like was Woman's Own and things like that in the past. And those magazine columns, I used to have people write to me and say, is this a sign from the spirit? You know, and I was answering people's letters, you know, it was a letter column. And so many people had so many interesting feelings that came when they felt the spirit world were around them, and so many people had similar things to say. So I think what we could call this a form of synchronicity, because you know, I don't think the spirit world can actually alter the world around us per se, but sometimes events kind of change according to where we are spiritually. You know, weird coincidences happen to us. I've had so many of those. I could talk many videos about that, and some I've written about. But we get this coincidence, you know, it's as if events around us are somehow influenced by our deeper inner spiritual state. And I think particularly when there's a death, that power of synchronicity, that power for strange coincidences to happen without any cause or reason, come into play, because very powerful forces are at work when a life has left this world. So this is what we call synchronicity. So it's a sign from the spirit world, but it's happening perhaps not consciously by the spirit world. These things happen to say that person's all right. It's as if the world around us somehow reflects us. It's like a mirror to our spirit. Anyway, one of the most significant, I think, is when people die, and often when the spirit world around us, we get a fragrance. Now, I had this happen to me with a very, very, very powerful smell of jasmine when my father died. Now, there was no reason to associate jasmine with my father, but he at the time had a picture up of Sathya Sai Baba by the side of his deathbed, and that I felt was like a recognition that he was safe, because jasmine was a smell that was associated with Sathya Sai Baba. So for me it was a fantastically powerful smell and significant to me. And that same fragrance appeared around Jane simultaneously at a different place at the moment my dad died. And also when my father died, everybody's clocks stopped. All our watches stopped, and all our phones rang simultaneously. There was 4 of us that had that simultaneous experience, all at the same time. And similarly, when other people have died, a friend of Jane's died, Keith, and we were surrounded by a smell of burnt toast, and other members of the family had this same smell of burnt toast. And yet that was something I'd associated a lot with him, because he used to make a lot of jokes about always burning the toast. So perhaps fragrance are one way the spirit world can connect with this, perhaps because there's such a strong emotional link with the idea of smells and perfume, and it connects to old memories somehow. So perhaps it's just an easy way to make a communication. Clock stopping is another thing that tends to happen when somebody dies. I had lots of letters about this through those columns I mentioned earlier, and everybody used to write about that the clock stopped as a person died. So many letters, in fact, that it became almost too many to mention ever in the column. But one happened to my nan, you know, when her son died, and the clock stopped at exactly 8 o'clock in the evening, which was the time he passed to spirit. But strangely enough, every year at exactly the same time, the clock would stop at 8 o'clock on the same day, on the anniversary of his death. You know, the same clock always stop at 8 o'clock. I mean, that was extraordinary, you know, that it would stop time after time after time like that. So if you've had a clock stop, that could be a sign that the spirits around you, particularly at the time of a death. It seems that comes up. But also, many people mention that they feel the spirit close when there's like a temperature change. I mean, you often talk about temperature drops when there's ghosts around, people will say. And that can sometimes be a misunderstanding of things, I think, and there's been a bit of scientific research about that too. But, maybe our blood pressure changes, maybe there's a sense in ourselves that there's a temperature change if a spirit person is near us. We associate cold with death, don't we? So maybe there's a connection there somehow. Certainly another sign that people take as being important, as a sign that somebody's around them, are birds and butterflies. I say that because, again, when I did my columns, there were many people that wrote about butterflies appearing on the coffin. The butterflies used to land on the coffin during the funeral, and they took that as a sign that, that was their spirit, that was a spiritual sign. I thought, oh, people are probably reading into that, until I saw it happen at funeral, and I thought, well, blimey, that seems so out of place to see a butterfly fly into a church and land on a coffin. And I had lots of people write this to me. Again, birds are often symbols of transcendence because they fly, you see. It's like escaping, it's a spirit escaping the body, isn't it? And I had a lot of letters again about people who wrote things such as birds tapping on the window after someone died, because that's often taken as a superstition, that if a bird taps on the window, this means there's going to be a death, or if a bird flies down the chimney or is in the house, that's a sign of a death. I mean, we like to have thousands of deaths in our family because the cats keep bringing the birds in. So I don't think we want to read too much into the superstitions, but sometimes there's that strange coincidence where a bird somehow plays a role in the person's feelings, that the spirit world has somehow given them a message. Of course, when electric things go wrong as well is a sign perhaps that their spirit world are close to us. Often we feel that sometimes if the lights flicker, could that be somebody close? Or if the computer starts to do strange things, could that be somebody close? I mean, the strangest one I had, and this takes a bit of believing, is that we were doing a seance I used to have, I call it a seance, a circle it was really, but we were doing a seance in a hall that I hired, it was a small medieval sort of building, and when we were doing it, the kettle turned on by itself. The thing is, the kettle wasn't plugged in, and the water when we got to it was hot. How did that happen? A kettle boiling without being plugged in? So, I mean, that's a hard one for you to believe. But often in your own life you might find that electrical things have gone wrong sometimes, at the time of a death often, or perhaps when you're talking about somebody that's just passed over, or talking about the spirit of somebody that's been over a while maybe, the lights might flicker as you talk about them, and that's an eerie, strange feeling, even though of course the lights might flicker from time to time because of the changes of the generators at the electric boards and so forth. But it makes you think when it happens in exact synchronicity again with the time you're talking about that person. Another thing people often, and I wrote about feathers, but people feel that finding things often can represent an interception from the spirit world. Finding a feather, they often feel, is like an angel's crossed their path. And there's a superstition that finding a coin can represent that the spirit world are close to you. These are kind of superstitious things, but again, I think that sometimes events kind of change, are fluid according to where our thoughts are. This idea of synchronicity, that sometimes things appear to us because of some unconscious connection with those things. Perhaps more psychically type things happening is when things actually start to happen around you, such as you start to see objects move. I mean, I have seen objects move when we've worked in poltergeist places where we've been asked to remove a poltergeist from a boat in particular. I wrote about it in one of my books again. And we actually saw stuff flying around the room, and that's very, very rare. But a lot of people, and I've only really seen it once if I think about it. Well, I did see a strange mist once too. But anyway, I've seen some strange stuff in my time. But it's very rare indeed, actually, to see actual moving things when you're doing a spirit clearance, for example. I mean, they make it up on television. Don't believe any of that rubbish. I know from the cameramen I've talked to that most of that stuff is made up and cheats. But when you see it with your own eyes and something moves, it's a very strange feeling. And again, from the letters I've had through my columns over the years, there are some very interesting stories of people who say things have moved across the room. These are just ordinary people who make no claims to being psychic, certainly not claiming to be on ghost hunts or anything of the sort. There's often very old people sometimes, because I wrote for some of the magazines for the older people once, would see things move across the room. So obviously that's a pretty good sign that the spirit's around you if that sort of thing happens, and I wouldn't worry about it either. Often these ideas with poltergeist, from what I've seen, they're often energies that are projected from a living person rather than the spirit, actually, most of the time. But that's a whole new video we could make about that. But also, trust your inner feelings as well, because that often is, for me, I feel, when you really know the spirit is close. You don't have to have these objective proofs. You can do it through your mind, because mediumship works through my mind. If I'm connecting for someone in the spirit world, I tune in, I open my thoughts, I open my feelings, and then I express what I feel. And that will often contain lots and lots of evidence to prove to the person that I'm connecting with somebody in the spirit. And it's the same if the spirit are connecting to me or connecting to you. You trust your inner feelings. You might feel the presence of someone you loved close to you. You might feel your mum close. You might get the sense and feeling of her. Well, perhaps she is impressing your thoughts with her own thoughts, and for a moment you are kind of conjoined. You're linked together. Your thoughts and her thoughts are influencing each other. No one's going to take you over, but it's like a still pool. If your mind is open and clear, it's like they can drop a coin in and they see the ripples across it. So if your mind is still in meditation, for example, maybe you can pick up the ripples of their consciousness from the other side. And similarly, one of the good times when this can all happen is in dreams, because our mind, our conscious, rational mind that's all preoccupied with the world around us and running around in circles as it does, it's stiller. And it's more open, and it's open to the unconscious. So very often the spirit world can come through our unconscious minds and connect with us. And of course, finally, apparitions, isn't there? Sometimes we actually see the spirit people stood objectively out there in front of us. Objective clairvoyance, we call this. This sometimes can be, I think, the own medium's mind seeing it projected in the world around them. But then I've also seen cases where I've seen figures walk across a room, and that's not my normal form of mediumship, because I would do it as a mental mediumship. So, there's different ways of seeing the spirit. We can sense it internally, we may see it outside ourselves. But I say the best way to connect, to know that the spirit's around you, is simply to listen within. Let the thoughts come to you, and you'll find that the spirit people are always close. Their love is always there, giving you the reassurance that life continues, that they're still there, that we don't really lose anything at all at death. We just take off one overcoat, and like our body's the overcoat, we take it off and move into the spirit world. So often these things happen actually when you least expect it. Consciously sitting down saying, oh, why haven't they connected with me? Why haven't they connected is the wrong way. Just let yourself relax into it and know that the spirit will probably connect with you when your mind's distracted, when your mind's still, when you're been asleep. So don't have any fear with these things. Just take comfort in the fact that the spirit world are there all the time. And even that if you haven't felt you've had a sign, they're still there, working with you through your mind, through your feelings, through your thoughts, giving you the reassurance that life goes on forever. So I hope that was some interest to you, and as I often have been saying, Jane and I are in the theatre at the moment. Come and have a look at our website at psychics.co.uk, where you can get tickets to come and see us in the theatre, and maybe we can give you some real proof that the spirit are with you. By giving you evidential mediumship. That's verifiable things that will say to you, yes, that's my mum, or yes, that's my dad. Nobody else could know that, So we can get our proof and we can get our signs from the spirit in many different ways. And I hope that gives you a little bit of comfort. If you enjoy my channel, why not come and also join us on Facebook Live? Jane and myself broadcast regularly where you can ask questions and join in the fun of the psychic chat. Join us on Facebook Live.